All right, welcome to the Driveline Baseball Podcast today. We're going to be talking a little bit about the rule change in college going from to the 34-man roster and some of the knock-on effects of that. But rather than get into the weeds a bit on like what exactly is going on with the roster change and how that all sorts out, which D1 Baseball has been doing a good job of covering, I think one of the things that we've been talking about here is what does it mean for the high school player? You know, the high school player who's trying to prepare and actually, you know, make it to the next level in college. Like, what are the considerations? Because seemingly, you know, over the last couple of years, but now certainly with the 34 man shop, like world looks a lot different now if you're a junior or a senior. So I guess the first question that comes to my mind is like, just how would you think about preparing? Like if you're a 16 or 17-year-old player right now, what are the things that you need to make sure are dialed before you step on campus, because you might not get a shot at developing them while on campus?
I can start that one off. On the physical side, I think like really straightforward. Like with the new rules, how competitive rosters are, especially if you're going into a 4-year or you're looking to go into a 4-year. The athletes that you're competing with are 1 to 4 years older than you as a freshman, and the physical maturity gap between an 18 and a 22 or 23-year-old is pretty huge.
Mm-hmm.
And already, like what we see just on average from high school to college, like the gap in physicality, we're talking like 15% change in body weight, over a 30% chance or change in max strength. Like our college guys are over 30% stronger than our average high school guy. And that's not even including your COVID seniors, your red shirts or whatever, where those guys are getting older and older and older. These are just the averages that we see. And so the physical maturity, there's going to be a big gap. So if you're going in as a freshman, you need to be going in as a physically mature freshman, because the you don't want that to be, the skill is still going to be a separator, but it's like the minimum physical requirement. Like you have to be able to hang physically to get the chance to hang with your skill.
Yeah, and building off that for hitting, it's going to be a lot of the same. Like the most important thing is like you're going to be physically developed enough to compete at that next level with guys that are 1 to 4 to 5, 6 years older than you. But that being said, like one of the most important things, like you just have to have developed skills. Like obviously your bat speed needs to be developed. These guys are going to be bigger, stronger than you. They're going to move the bat a hell of a lot faster, hit the ball a hell of a lot harder. So like you need to separate yourself there. Like our college average bat speed is something right around 70 miles an hour. Our high school average is right around 67, but that's the average. And that's spread between JUCO guys, NAIA, D3, all the way up to D1. And our best D1 hitters are pushing like mid to high 70s on blast for bat speeds in like game-like training environments. Like last winter, Travis Bazzana was hitting mixed pitch on the eye pitch, and his average bat speed in rounds was just like 77.5, 78. And he was like really, really pushing that ceiling. And if you're not going into college being able to at least do that in batting practice, being able to hit balls that hard, like you're just not going to be anywhere near good enough relative to the competition you're competing against.
Because like a lot of the incentive for a college coach is just like, well, now that the portal's open too, like there's sort of minimal incentive to bring guys in, develop them for a couple of years, redshirt them, get them stronger, and then matriculate. It's just like, well, look, I'd just rather have like 6 kids that I can transfer in.
Yeah, you're expecting the freshman, the sophomore you bring in to be able to contribute immediately.
Yeah, otherwise it's almost like what's the point? Like why even have them? You think that's fair?
I mean, they're going to transfer too, right? Yeah, if you don't play them and you develop them, that's the plight of the mid-major these days. So it's a tough balance of developing a high school freshman and hoping they're committed to the program, but there's real no guarantees there, and then being able to transfer guys in. So I think that's pretty tough. But I agree with Whitey. For me, it's the physicality side. Is if you're not ready to compete, at that level, physically, you have no chance. But good reason to stick around too is like the coach gaining familiarity with players. I think is really important too. Like even if you are as physical as the next guy, if someone's 21 and is a junior and has been there for a little bit, and the coach trusts him, you got to be a lot better. You can't just be as good or a little bit better. You got to be a lot better because that guy's been with him. He knows him. He knows him. You know, he's gone to class. He knows his habits. And for all the foibles the kid has, is he's had 2 years to impress the coach with his work habits and just his loyalty. So you got to be a lot better. You know, the coach is definitely going to play the best 9, but it's also going to be a level of comfort on who he trusts to execute in the game.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying that the transfer stuff like works both ways. That like if you're a sophomore, you're not getting playing time. It's like just as easy for you to leave now, and so there really is this like it's there is this like sense of like it's hard to build a program. It's potentially impossible.
Yeah, we're heading. A coach once told me is like we're heading for the FBS FCS split. You know, like football has. It's the haves and the have-nots. You know. And I don't know how they're going to make that work with the midweek games, but yeah, I foresee that going. Yeah, well, I mean, it's basically the SEC versus a select number of schools that can pay that much, and then the rest. You know, so it's a really thorny situation we're in. You know, made worse by the 34-man rule changes that just happened this year.
Mm. How does that make it worse?
It was such a late decision by the rule committee, and the lawsuits and everything that's caused it to happen, which are. In a lot of ways, the schools have it coming for NIL to be a thing. We can all complain about why it's here, but there's clear reasons why it's happened the way it has. So it's just causing a lot of kids to get thrown out on the curb. You know, over this last week, we've seen it. We're recording this mid-October, and we've seen kids need a new home in the last 2 weeks that are good players. They're on pretty big scholarships, and it just doesn't matter because of the abrupt rule change. They can't carry as many players in fall heading into the spring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know everyone wants to blame the college coaches. I understand that, but I'm not saying they don't deserve some culpability here. But a lot of it was foisted on them at the last second. So it's not entirely their issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's only the decisions in front of you to make. It's hard to make promises in one environment and then keep them entirely in a completely separate environment.
Yeah, people see like 34 kids on a roster. That's a lot of players, and you only play 9, and there's whatever. And it's just like, look, I've seen some comparisons made to the big leagues. So there's 26 people on the active roster. It's like, dude, the 40-man roster is not even enough to support a big league team. It's like that was the intention, but there's still tons of people getting injured on the 60-day, taken off the 40-man, added to the 40-man, signed, waived. It's like there's teams are going through 50-some players to make a big league season. Now we're not talking about 162 games in a college season, but you do have to play a full slate of fall games to figure out who can play. And then you got to play the 60 games in the spring. So it's hard with classes, eligibility, injuries, variable performance. It's not that easy in college. You don't need the entire 40 to 50 people, but 34 is cutting it real close. College coaches have said that. They've gotten yelled at on Twitter about it, but unless you've coached college or unless you've seen it or done stuff in pro ball, you don't know how many players you really do need more than you think.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we talked a little bit about the physicality components? Do you think it's possible to show up on campus as a freshman and be able to compete physically with 21, 22-year-olds? Like how early would a high school kid have to start and really focus on that in order to actually achieve that target?
I think that's one of those where it's like the best time was yesterday, next best time's today.
Sure.
Where the sooner the better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was actually just talking about this with the academy guys on their pod yesterday, talking about the long-term athletic development. But wherever you are, however you've gotten there, if you were going back to start thinking you're entering high school, 15, 16 years old, that's a pretty long runway to develop those physical traits, and your individual capacity for muscle mass, hypertrophy, those kind of things is going to be pretty individual. How fast can you get there? How big can you get? But can I get better? Could I beat the freshman version of me if I start training now? Easily. And when you think about those guys that you're going to be competing with, they haven't all been just crushing it since they're 16 either. It's going to be a mixed bag. Some of them, if there's a really physically developed 23-year-old, a physically developed 18-year-old is going to lose physically to a physically developed 23-year-old. But that's not college rosters aren't just like straight beasts across the board.
Sure.
Right. Like you're looking to basically beat like the average 21-year-old baseball player.
Mhm.
And that line is like definitely something that like a 16, 17, 18-year-old can beat. Like we have kids in our academy that are testing above those levels in max strength, explosive strength, a little bit lower on the body weight side for a handful of those guys, but being able to produce that force is like number one. And then like they'll fill out their frames as they get closer, and if they don't, they'll at least know that they did everything possible to be ready to.
If the target is to be better than like the average 21-year-old, like in the player population at 21, like, do you think by the time that you're, call it 16, 17, you're like making these decisions on where to try to go? Is that also roughly around the time, like a 2-year window to basically develop those skills and try to beat the 21-year-old average? Like, do you think that is enough time?
I would say so, and depends on where you're starting. But if you're starting at like the average 15 to 16-year-old that we see coming in, I would say yes, that's enough time. Like with the average changes that we see, because typically training blocks for us are about 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
The average change that we see over a 6-week block, like you're going to see some diminishing returns over a 2-year period. But for 15, 16, 17-year-olds old, like not that much. Like you're going to see a lot of gains in 2 hard years of training if you're 16 years old, because like that's where your body's at. It's very much ready to make these changes physically. And I think that's like a super realistic, and also like that's one of many boxes you're going to have to check to show up and produce on a college field. But that's like one that's like directly controllable in terms of like, I set the right plan, I put in the right effort to execute that plan,
Mm-hmm.
and I get the right results. Like the weight room is going to be a lot more black and white than a lot of areas in the game. And a lot of it's just kind of come down to time times consistency times effort.
What are the like less black and white areas that you think are like potential like time sucks?
In like the weight room or across just
No,
in general?
across the board. Like what I thought I understood you were saying was like, look, it's just real straightforward to just like put in time under tension in the weight room, and just like you can develop those physical skills. But time that you're doing that is time that you're not spending doing X, Y, or Z, whatever other things. What are some of those activities that you think are like lower payoff?
I think like periodizing the competition, like is what I would say, in terms of like, are you playing fall ball as an underweight 16-year-old, like where you're playing like a full schedule of fall baseball games, and like the competitive side of the game is very important. Like that needs to be developed too. Like players should be competing and trying to win as they progress, but also like it's a trade-off of like, how much does that matter to me as a 16-year-old? Like what do these fall games mean relative to that opportunity cost of missing out on that extra time in the weight room? And so the time that should be spent at that level focusing on maximizing like production in a competitive environment should be significantly less than it should for the 18-year-old senior that doesn't have a spot to play college baseball. Like that guy in your senior spring, if you don't have a spot to play competitive baseball, your number one responsibility is to do whatever you can to do is produce maximally on the baseball field.
Mm-hmm.
Got to put up numbers.
Exactly. And if you're 16 years old, the best thing you can do to set yourself up to be in the best spot once you are 18 is to build the base that's going to allow you, is going to give you the chance to develop the skills to magnify. Like step one is like building the base.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a tweet last week, like pyramid can only be as tall as it is wide. Like you have to build the base, and that happens physically. And if you're playing games just year round, you've probably gotten all of the benefit you're going to get out of being in a competitive environment like that, and like probably tapped out at that many games, and you're losing out on a lot of time to develop physically.
On the hitting side, I'd be interested, like think from the pitching side, I'd be interested like what's an immediate disqualifier? You coach college, you play college ball. On the pitching side, a big thing that I'm really excited that we're rolling out, is the intended zones stuff. If you go in as a freshman, you're physically fit, things are good, and you don't throw strikes, dude, it's gonna be super hard to get a chance.
Yeah,
your stuff can be great and all that, but like college coach has seen a lot. It's like, but if you throw strikes, at the worst, you're going to get a million chances to give up dingers and intramurals, which is like, they still need batting practice pitchers, but like, you're going to get your chance. You're going to get competitive opportunities. So that's what I think is like, these kids need to drill intended zones, work on these, and we offer that now. There's ways to do it. And this way, like was Whitey's talking about, like the lifting never goes away, but if competition on a field in fall ball is our thing, then lifting is in service to that. We make sure that the lifting doesn't interfere with that. That might not be the right thing to do. Now if we're going to be lifting and then we throw intended zones or whatever, those things are much easier. You can plan those you choose when you want to throw the intended zones. You don't always get to choose when you play a game in the fall, so it's easier to work in the skill stuff there. So for me, it's like, look, yeah, the stuff is good. It's got to be good. I love stuff. But a fast disqualifier is an 18-year-old trying to compete at a Power 5 school. If you don't throw strikes, your opportunities are going to be extremely limited to show off what you can do.
Yeah.
So what are some of those things on the hitting side?
Yeah.
Or the defense, position player generally.
Yeah, it's like it's like that fine line where like the biggest differentiator is going to be like you need to be developed physically to compete at that next level. But like that's where the hard part's at, where it's like guys are playing a bunch of games like that matters because if you want to contribute in college right away, like you have to be good at playing baseball. You have to play the game well. But like the immediate disqualifier, like if you want to go play at a Power 5 immediately as a freshman, is like if you can't handle velocity, you have absolutely no chance. So it's like in your training, you want to develop physically. Obviously, you need to be good at playing baseball. So playing is important. So like the most important thing for like the 16-year-old kid to do is very likely just bump up the difficulty level in your training environments. Like in high school, you're just going to be seeing fastballs from like 80 to 85. You're going to run into the random pitcher who like throws low 90s, who's really good, right? But like most of the time, guys at the lower level, like their training environment, they like to live near their competition level. So it's like, yeah, if you're going to hit off the machine, like you see a lot of guys in high school want to set it up at like 75 miles an hour, just right down the middle fastballs, really easy controlled. So you're immediately doing yourself a disservice, not making that difficulty level much, much harder than your actual competition level at the time. Because the second you get into college, you're just going to be completely overmatched by the stuff you're seeing. Because these guys are much more developed. Physically, they're throwing harder. Their stuff is going to be better. So it's like you need to be able to handle that to have any shot at playing right away when you get to college.
That's a good point. If the first time, or like one of the first few times you've seen 95 is in the fall,
you have no chance.
In a stadium, I mean, the coach
you have absolutely no chance.
Yeah, I mean, you can even go 3 for 4 on the day, and the coach, he's not going to be fooled. He's going to know that you've never. You can tell when you step in, and the first time you take a pitch 95, the coach is like,
Yeah, he's never seen that before.
Yeah,
you can see that right away.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, just like the confidence level. And you can go 0 for 4 or whatever, but it's like if you have the confidence level, you get your swing off at 95. The coach isn't expecting you to be the greatest player in the world at 18. Mm-hmm. But so if you have confidence, and the other thing is like you're physically fit. I mean, just listen to what Nick Saban talks about. He paid his strength coach the most anyone ever, made. And that he just, praised on how important that was. And every coach believes that to some extent. So it's like, if you have confidence, like, dude, you're going to keep getting those extra chances. Mm-hmm. If you're throwing strikes and your stuff's flat or whatever, and you're getting hit, the coach is like, well, he gives, at least has been a good teammate by doing this. And there's, opportunity. So you have to figure out how you're going to stand out at 18, or like not stand out, how you're almost not going to stand out, how you're going to make sure that you fit in, with the rest of the guys almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Doesn't that almost invert what's valuable on the recruiting side of things? Like it used to be that like the big sort of opportunity on the pitching side of things was like, we're going to recruit velocity and then we're just going to teach them how to pitch when they get onto campus. But it almost switches where it's like, yeah, look, you need to be able to pitch. Like you need to be able to pitch.
Yeah,
like I
can't have them. You used to be able to take in a guy that throws 100 that throws no strikes, but you got him for 3 years.
Yeah, you just warehouse him.
Yeah. But now it's like you can't do that.
That guy's gonna have to pitch at some point.
Right. Yeah. And like look at the high profile transfers that don't throw strikes, or like the Chase Burns of the world when he transferred. It's like that guy threw plenty of strikes, just like perhaps not enough in a starter role that they wanted.
Sure.
It's like that doesn't count. That guy threw plenty and then obviously demonstrated that he did at the next level, So yeah, if you truly throw no strikes, and it's like, look, that's just not, you're not going to get a long leash because the coaches can't afford it anymore. There's a totally different spot. Whereas if you throw a ton of strikes, I'm not sitting here go to school and throw 82 and throw strikes. I mean, the coach doesn't want to see that either. It's just like maybe if you feel for secondaries or competing, or like, oh man, I've never faced hitters that know how to lay off a slider. I mean, the coach is expecting all that. That's okay, but if you throw no strikes and your stuff is like, super far away, I mean, or is really far ahead, it doesn't matter either way. You're not valuable to the team. You got to think about being a good teammate. That's important. How does this help the team get better, even if you can't help us on a Friday, in the spring? That's what I think people really got to understand. Is playing a role there too.
Yeah.
Max Gordon would say that all the time. He was at Arizona State. He's like, look, freshman year, he basically never played. And he's like, I got my chances. I didn't do it. So that is what it is. I don't deserve to play, but he kept getting his chances in the fall. He's a high energy guy, really good for the team. And then sophomore year, he got a million chances in the fall, and then, eventually got to play every day, sophomore and the junior, obviously going through that, so you have to, and he was a great teammate, obviously everyone at Oregon State says he's one of the best teammates. So you got to just keep earning your chances. And at no point did he complain about not playing his freshman year. He's like, I got my chances. Why should I get a chance on Friday against Stanford? I shouldn't, like I didn't do anything in the fall, so.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Is like now like Max Gordon played at Oregon State at a time before the transfer portal.
Yep.
So it's just like, all right, yeah, I didn't get it done. So I can go. There's a very obvious way for me to transfer, not sit out a year, and go play at a level where I can get it done or like get more opportunities. And the idea that you could just ping pong back and forth between those things, it's like show up to a level, wash out, go to some other level. That used to happen with Power 5 schools bringing guys in the fall and then kicking them all out to JUCOs only to see them like transfer back in. But it's way more dispersed across the entire landscape now, to where it's like, yeah, mid-majors could be JUCOs and D2s can be JUCOs and JUCOs are JUCOs. It's kind of nuts.
And with the restriction of the 34-man slides, now the coaches literally can't take chances on a lot of players. Like before, it's like, oh, we can't because it's a soft can't. I don't know if we want to have all these players here. And now they're like, no, it's illegal to take on a 35th, whatever, So they can't even really be warehousing these prospects, so to speak.
Sure.
At any level, I don't care what level you coach at.
And the other, the other difficulty, I guess, for that is like, there's 9 people penciled into the lineup, but like, the 33rd guy is probably seeing some exposure through the course of the year. Like it's not like guys would get rostered and then never see the field.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be basically impossible to do that, given injuries and eligibility and stuff like that. Yeah.
Sure.
Like you're going to have to count on all those guys contributing in some regard. So it's tough. Junior college has become. It's good in a lot of ways because junior college, I think college baseball, I've said this a lot and the scouts agree with me too. It's just that baseball's at its best when junior college is strong, and I think that was the case kind of when I was, moved here and getting to watch all the issues with the draft and follow. That was not a great system, but I mean, when I went to watch Everett play Edmonds, I was like, there's 18 dudes drafted. They're just waiting. It was ridiculous. I watched Zink pitch against Hebner and it was like, what? These guys would get outs in AA. And then they went and did that, and maybe we don't have to go that extreme. But when the junior colleges are good, generally, like I think that's really good. Let's talk about the fact that college is completely unaffordable these days. So 1, you're easing the burden on your parents. 2, you find out if you really like baseball if you played in junior college ball, as both of you certainly know.
Damn right.
Better than I do. And it's instead of like, oh, if you go JUCO, you can only go here or whatever. There's only certain schools that take it. Now that's not the case. You're like high academic schools are taking them for the right fit and so forth, because that's just the reality of the 34-man roster. And so I think it's a good thing. I think it can be a good thing because you do find out if you really like baseball or not.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really important, considering the roster cut down, is just like defensive versatility.
Yeah.
So you're just going to give yourself a better chance if you can play multiple positions at least relatively well, right? Like it'd probably be a good idea to maybe learn how to catch. Like worst case scenario, you're the third catcher, emergency catcher on the roster, but like you're playing left field or something. Somebody gets hurt, somebody fails a class, gives you an opportunity to stay on the roster because you can help out in different ways. So I would honestly lean into that too for the younger guys, like learn how to play other positions. Like obviously to get somewhere and play and contribute right away, you have to be pretty damn elite at a certain spot, but having the versatility to play different positions is only going to help you.
How would you, as like a thought experiment or whatever, like let's say you're a 15-year-old and you're like, okay, like I want to play mid-major D1 baseball or above. And right now, you're like mildly above average high school player. Like what is the plan? Like what is like draw me out like 3 years of like, hey, this is how we should go and execute this. Because on the one hand, I think it, if I'm thinking through it from, you know, a parent standpoint or even an athlete standpoint, it's like it can always feel like there's just not enough time in the day to do all the stuff. Because on the one hand, you know, you take some time off to train, and then 2 kids on your team are playing in the summer circuit and they get signed or whatever, or like they get a scholarship. It's like you can feel pulled in so many different ways. Like, what if you just got to draw it out, sort of soup to nuts? Like, how would you guys have a position player show up on campus and actually like compete for and win a roster spot?
You talking?
Let's do
like
a hit. Let's do a hit.
When they're younger.
Yeah. Like
in high school
what
or
would
when they're in
you
college?
have them do? Like starting at 15 all the way up through like first day of showing up on campus.
And you said this is they're like generally above average high school or for their age level.
They're a solid but unremarkable, like, you know, they're playing on a team.
Yeah, you're on the high school team. You're in the lineup every day.
Yeah,
Not necessarily
you're all right.
the sophomore that's getting the D1 looks yet.
100%.
Scouts are asking you where the other players are.
That's
at,
right.
You know,
Where-
they're not asking about you yet.
They're asking where the bathroom is.
Yeah.
I mean, it starts on the physical development side.
Yeah, I think setting up your year, like first of all, like at 15, like so going into sophomore year, I would say, you're playing spring for your high school, and then summer. How much you play in the summer should depend on like your at bat needs. If we're talking for a position player, like if you're regularly starting all through your spring season, like you got a lot of ABs. You got to kind of push the gas pedal a little bit on the competitive side.
Mm-hmm.
That box is checked. It's time to develop. Like it's off season mode. Like you're about to go into a really long off season until next spring is what I would say. Like that summer should be mainly allocated towards the beginning of your off season. Like you're building training capacity. So like in the weight room, 3 to 4 times a week, lifting for 45 to 75 minutes of meat and potatoes work, pushing sleds, learning how to get the fundamental movements down if you haven't already, squat, press, row, hinge, getting the basics down at high capacities and incrementally increasing the load to like build strength, put on muscle mass, start to maximize your frame and like what you can do as an athlete. So along with those things, sprinting, jumping, landing, checking all like the very basic, the very general physical qualities, because we can progress very cleanly from like general to specific. It's going to be a lot harder to go from specific to general. Like if we start narrow and try to work broad, we're going to have wasted whatever time we put in on the specific anyways. So we start general in those ways, build capacity, learn how to train is going to be a big one. Like learn what it really means to push it very hard in the weight room, how that workload compares with the time you're putting in the cage and all of that. And like understanding what training economy is. Like you only have so much training throughout a day or throughout a week that you can allocate. Like how much of that training economy dollar do I spend in the weight room versus the cage? And when you're at that point early on, a lot of that should be spent on your physical development, getting bigger, faster, stronger. And then transitioning as you carry through the summer, fall, that focus should start to change a little bit to getting a little bit more specific. But what's specific, I would say for a 15-year-old is more general than what's specific for a college kid. Like the properties that you're training, like now your specific is converting just like those general physical things into like, all right, I'm going to do a little bit of rotating. I'm going to put a little bit more work in the cage and start to focus on like creating more bat speed, like building still like the general side, like physical. Like Tanner can make better recommendations, but I would think that like if your bat speed is 60 miles an hour, your swing decisions aren't going to be your lowest hanging fruit. So going from learning how to train, building those things up and like creating that runway. And then if your games are starting in February or March as a high schooler, once you're getting into January, you can start to shift into getting more sprints, introduce more like medicine balls, rotational work, Ideally, you're seeing like a live arm at that point, more competitive environment to get ready to play. But any off season for any level of player, you've got two goals. You got development and preparation. For the younger you are, the more of that time should be spent on the development side. So you're spending almost that whole off season in development mode, and then the preparation is, what do I need to do to like maximize all that work I put into so it shows up on the high school field this spring?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the hitting side specifically. I like the idea how you framed it as like a long off season for the guy. Like you got a bunch of at bats during your season, like you're in a pretty good place there. It's like you're not really going to get a lot out of going and playing a bunch in the summer. So often you hear high school hitters, it's just like, hey, I need to go play to get a chance to go get seen. But it's like you're just going to go get seen and hit 250 with no slug because you're underdeveloped. You don't have any bat speed. Nobody's going to see you and want you anyway, right? So it's like you're better off using that time, especially for the guy that had like a pretty good high school season or like got a ton of at bats. Like you're better off spending that time really leaning into a long off season, developing physically. And again, that's where it starts. Like the best hitting program is going to more or less kind of be built off of their HP plan and just like iterated on as you go to kind of balance the workload and figure out the needs. But it's the same deal. It's like you're going to progress things throughout the off season. Like you're further away from competition. That's the time where you can like really start to lean into making any kind of swing, bat path changes, really start to lean into like building up the workload capacity for bat speed training as you're developing on the physical side. And then as like you progress closer to competition, you start to blend in more of like bat to ball, bat path, contact quality type of work. And then as you're getting closer to the games, then you're getting more into like live arm mixed pitch type of stuff where you're really starting to focus on your swing decisions. But again, like you said, like if your training economy is going to your swing decisions and your average bat speed is 60 miles an hour, like that's really not going to move the needle for you much. Not only in your next high school season, but now especially when you get to college. So yeah, it's like really leaning into developing on like the physical side early in that off season. You really lean into start making the swing changes, and then from there, it's just like trying to build up the capacity, build up the speed, try to maintain the bat pass swing changes as you start to progress the difficulty in your training environments. Start to blend that closer to competition where you're seeing more mixed, more live arm. Start to blend more like approach focused training where you're doing like leverage counts versus 2 strikes. Start to get into more of like the controlling the barrel, hitting it around different parts of the field, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The first impressions matter too. If they see you bad, that sets it up for
it's immediately
hey, you hope they
off the
ignore
list,
you, but like they got a long memory, college coaches, and I'm not going to say the player's name. There's a player I was first coaching out here in high school that one of the high school coaches who had him was, I think this guy's better than this other shortstop who's getting a ton of run. And I was like, I think he's pretty good. The other guy gets big D1 scholarship. This guy walks on, even at the college, he barely gets opportunities, drafted lower than him, all this other stuff. And in Pro Bowl, he just gets limited opportunities. And then the difference is the way the story ends is that the guy that was always the underdog did eventually play in the big leagues, which is great. But the entire time was like the reason that he was behind the 8 balls, he played football, he did other things. And not saying he should have changed his career, but it's like that followed him. Now he was tough enough to not care and just deal with that. But that's not that simple. Your first reaction, your first impression of the scouts was like, he's okay. And at the last second, he was walking on a Division I school. And whereas the other guy had a full ride as junior year of high school, and yet they're basically the same player. High school stats are all the same, everything you see. And from my perspective, since I hadn't seen them since they were 11 years old, I was like, these are fundamentally the same player. I don't understand why people like the one over the other and why the one gets scholarship opportunities, the other one doesn't. It's like, well, they all saw him at a certain time, and that can be, the first impressions can be tough, and again, that was in a time when there were 40 rounds to the draft and no limits to the rosters. And now you're making these tough decisions. You're trying to fill out the last 4 spots of your roster, and it's brutal. 10 kids in the portal you're looking at, and then 9 freshmen. It's not easy for a college coach, to figure out where they're going to allocate these spots. And the other thing I want to mention is your grades got to be good. It's to be. And I tell the kids this, and they all laugh or whatever. It's like, dude, like
I tell it to every high school, college kid that walks through here in the summer that starts asking.
You know how good you got to be to have a 2.5, bro. You got to be the greatest player of all time. Because call it what it is, but man, the compliance department, they hammer baseball because they know it typically has one of the highest GPAs in all of the school. So then they expect to continue having the highest GPAs. And we know the sports that can get away with lower GPAs, but I mean, it's rated by the program. It's rated by the college in general. The NCAA cracks down hard. So are they going to crack down on football and these revenue sports, or are they going to come down harder on the other sports? The answer to that. So it's just easier. If you have 3.8, good SAT scores, whatever, and you focus on that, it's going to be one of the first questions the coaches are going to ask. One of my best friends coach, in school, he told me, he's like, problems in the classroom always end up on the field. He would tell that to me all the time.
What does he mean by that? Just like a kid that struggles in school is gonna.
Yeah, you get these bad grades or this or whatever. It's like, why are you going to be good in practice? You might be good in the game. He's like, but like, great. He's like, but being good in practice means being good at things you don't like doing, which is the same as doing homework.
It's just being disciplined.
Right. He's just like, it always shows up, always, and he's like, I'm not looking for a 4.0. I'm not looking for a 16 SAT. I'm looking for a kid that never misses class, turns in stuff, has a clean record, and has decent enough grades that I don't have to worry about compliance getting on my ass about this, and, he's right 100%. But yeah, I mean, the scholarship money, if you're going to go to one of these mid-major schools, typically you can be private or, small public, you can get a lot of academic aid. If the coach knows that he doesn't have to give you any athletic or small athletic money or whatever, man, it just, between two people with the same skill set and one person getting way more academic aid, man, it makes the coach's job real simple on who to pick. Because A, he probably has stronger confidence you're not going to be a problem off the field. But then B, it's just no more money out of his pocket to get you there, and you'll probably have a longer rope if you want to stick it out 4 years at a school.
I was going to say, doesn't that make it easier to also keep you as well, since
Exactly.
you're like cheap?
Sure. Yeah, and additionally, like if you're going to go to a school, you shouldn't think necessarily about the baseball program. Like, can I see myself going to the school and graduating from here and like being this student? And if that's the case, like there has to be decent grades, it has to be opportunity. Because the coach is more likely to keep you around. Also, you'll continue to get that opportunity instead of being asked to go to the portal. Which is. People blame others, 10,000 kids in the portal or whatever. It's like, what percentage of them do you think voluntarily entered it? Like it's a vanishingly small number, So a good way to be forced into the portal is have poor grades and not perform, So you got your SAT scores and your grades, they got to be good, period. I mean, it just makes it, even if you don't care, even if you're never going to work a day in the office anywhere and you're just going to play professional baseball the rest of your life, even if that's the case, then high grades help get you there. Like significantly, they'll get you more opportunity on the field. Period.
How would you think about changing the long-term development stuff, but for pitchers, like where obviously I think the similarity is that you would want to build this like big base of like movement properties and like general physical preparedness, but like where does the skill stuff start to separate?
Yeah, I think right around 15. I mean, even at a young age, you have to be drilling command in ways that we know how to do. Forever we've been searching for the best way to do this, and we've been decent ideas at it. But now the intended zone, I mean, it's beautiful for these 12-year-olds, 13, 14. I don't care how old you are. Like they see it as a video game. The first guy that we ever had throw intended zones to the interactive target was a big leaguer who won the Cy Young. And he was like, "This is so sick. I love." He made Chris Langan be late to a meeting because he threw a 150 pitch bullpen. He was having so much fun, True. So I was there. It happened. And he was loving it. And these kids, they play so many video games these days, which isn't a bad thing. It's just like they see it as a video game. They see the missed distance and a score, and it's just you got to get locked in on that. And it's a great way to practice that. So that would be how I would consider. I mean, first of all, if you want good command, you need to be strong. Because like the stronger core control you have and the stronger you are, the more repeatability you have of your actions, the less fatigue you get in air. And it is all well-known stuff. So that's got to happen. Then secondly, you have to have that specific preparedness into intended zones and work on breaking balls and just get feel for shapes. And that can take many, many years. So starting at age 12, 13, 14, 15, you should be trying to drive that intended miss down. That should be a video game score to you. It's like golf. You just want to get that down by the time you're 16, 17. So when you go play in a showcase, like maybe you're good, maybe you're bad that day, but your stuff is what it is, and you're going to be competitive, and the coaches they're going to remember that because a lot of the best recruiting happens when the coach sees you bad. Like he doesn't want to see you good over and over and over again. Like I got sent out specifically on a special assignment when I was at the Reds. They're like, we hope you go see this pitcher, and we hope he's bad because they had 6 reports of a 65 on him, and they're just like, what? So the guy's just never bad? Like, what are we supposed to do? Then I went, he was bad. That was actually pretty helpful for them, because it provides context, and how you handle that is pretty important.
What, yeah, because I think one of the interesting things about, trying to develop velocity, you can do that in the weight room, you can do that with specific preparation, but then also like trying to dial in command is, at least from the pitching side of things, like 17-year-old hitters are not good. Like they can and will continue to get themselves out. So if you give yourself a couple of chances, you know, you can still be competitive without feeling your very best. And the same thing is true on the other side of the ball too, which is like, yeah, if you're a big leaguer, like you might get one cookie per at bat, or maybe two in a game or something, which you cannot miss.
Can't afford to miss it.
That's why guys are swinging 3-0, 2-0 so much more now.
Yeah.
There's no pitches off because 3-0, the pitch you get, it probably will be the best pitch you have to hit.
That's right.
And that's why the 3-0 slider rate is going up too, because the pitcher's like, yeah, all right, enough of this.
Yeah, right.
So many guys are still so passive first pitch in the at bat. It's like, especially their first one of the game. It's like, I just want to see one.
Dude, Guardians Yankees first pitch, sinker over the plate. Torres immediately single. He didn't wait. He's like, because he knows Cobb has really good command and has pretty good secondaries, and he's like, this is a sinker on the outer third of the plate. Like, what? Like, this is what I'm trying to hit, you know? And so even if he grounded out, Boone would have been like, I mean, it's fine. What would you hit? What'd you get? That makes sense.
Yeah, but not so in high school. Like,
no,
high school, you show up to the field, you're the leadoff guy. You hit an infinity hopper to the second baseman on the first pitch. You should see a few. That's right. You should see a few.
Like, put on your flats.
Yeah, you're gonna get some more opportunities.
Yeah, it's like in that situation, if you're swinging, it's either a pump or you hook it foul, or you're okay swinging and missing. You just can't get yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, but that specifically, knowing your swing well enough to develop that plan, identify the type of pitch that you are looking to do that on, and then pull off that swing so that it is truly home run or foul ball, is like so many layers under the thing. Like, and is that in the tool bag of a random 17-year-old?
The inverse is true about the pitchers too. Right? If you're a hitter, like, okay, my high school coach doesn't want to do that, you can take the first strike. Because the high school pitchers suck too, man.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
7 hittable pitches in an at-bat.
Yeah, you're getting 7.
Because, you can be a good teammate, take one, understand that that's the long game, and not get pissed. It's like, dude, if a guy's sitting 75 and you have to take a pitch so the runner on first can steal or whatever, like that would come up in like men's league or whatever. It's just
sure.
Like, oh, like, why do you do this? Like, he works at Costco and he throws 68. If I can't hit him, who cares? Like, that's my fault,
Right. Yeah.
And like, you should have total disrespect for the pitcher. It's like, dude, if I can't take a strike and beat the guy that's going to go work at Ernst & Young, like, I ain't going to go play at LSU. Like, what's the difference? I should be able to start every at-bat 0-2 and hit 500. If you're the man, and if you take that attitude and you tell the coach that, the coach is going to love that. I'll tell you that much, So, yeah, I mean, you got to have disrespect for the pitcher too. They're just not good. They're not.
Yeah, which also was I think Tanner's point about like guys love to play like right at their competition level. Like, it is so ingrained of just like
anything lower.
If anything lower,
just safer, more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. But like
you can get more good work in,
Good work. That's right. Which is funny because like good work in that thing feels like, I was in the cage today, I hit like 850.
Yeah.
It's just like, man, I was crushing balls.
Peppering balls in the gap all day long. Didn't miss once.
Great work.
No, it's such a privilege to get punched out 4 times by some guy that's going to be a first rounder. It's exciting. There's no scout's going to be like, oh, I can't wait. And you're facing J.R. Ritchie, the same one from Seattle, and he's sitting 96 and you get punched out 4 times. Like, yeah, that guy sucks. It's like, well, that scout's not expecting anything, Meanwhile, if you get hit 4 pumps off a dude that like, didn't show up all year because of drama class or whatever, the scout's not like, yep, that's our guy.
First rounder.
You
ever seen 4 home runs in a game?
Right, it takes a mental adjustment. It's not easy, but you can learn from those things. It's like, oh, like you finally get to see, instead of facing a machine, which is still fine, but it's like you get to see in the flesh like how brutal it's going to be at the next level. You gotta change your mindset. You gotta be happy about that.
But how would you? So if you're a parent trying to navigate these things, like how would you try to suss out like when should I be like encouraging this kid or mapping out a plan for them to develop physically, and when should I be seeking out like these higher levels of competition and navigating him through a summer where he hits like 170 because he's, like legitimately getting beaten by these like college players and he's in high school? I
think, Whitey's, it all starts with the physicality. If if you're not physical enough, if you're not ahead of your age band in terms of absolute strength and power and speed, then it doesn't matter. Now if you are, then we got to figure out what the issue is. But if you're not there, I don't think you've earned the right to talk about anything else. Mark Ripito would always say, starting strength, he's like, kids should just be banned from playing sports for 1 year in high school. Like at age 15, all you do is lift weights for 365 days. And then if you did that, you would never have to lift weights heavy ever again. It's like you would just be able to, you would never have to commit like more of 3x5, 5x5 training ever again. He's like, because you would just be able to build enough linear strength. And then you can just basically do intermediate program almost for the rest of your life, and he was talking in the terms of like soccer or baseball, not football necessarily. There's a lot to that. If you invest that time early in your career, early in your high school, early in college, then it's so much easier. Then you don't need to expend all these training economy on the stuff you should have been doing when you were 16, which is squatting 3x5 3 times a week and all that, because that is brutal. I did it for 1 year, got my strength extremely high, but it's like, dude, that takes everything out of you, to do it year round. And while you don't have to go that extreme, there is quite a bit of, saying to it, because I last squatted for real for like 10 plus years. I can go pull 500 because your strength stays with you for such a long time. It decays at such a slow rate. So investing in that early in your career is, I know we hammer on it all the time and the coaches say it all the time, but again, it's also being a good teammate. If you go in and you're having 0 for 15 or whatever, but the head coach sees you in the weight room outclassing seniors, he's going to remember that. A, that's awesome, and B, he's going to be like, there's some discipline. Like what happened, what was built along the way besides the strength and the physicality. So to me, like I know I keep harping on it, but it's the number one thing for sure.
I think with that too is without taking the full year off of competition, like that's where like training in the right way matters a lot. And like what we talked about earlier with like having the workloads, the training economy paired correctly, because as a high schooler, especially like a 15-year-old, you should be training in season pretty hard in the weight room. It shouldn't look the same as it should when you're not in games. But especially like the high school schedule is not a minor league schedule. You're not playing that many games. You're not having to get to 100% every night. The stress that's on you on the field is a lot lower, and the time you should be putting in the weight room is going to be really, really valuable. That way, each off season, you're not getting up and then you just don't do anything for 3 months, 4 months, and you get back slightly above your baseline. You should be able to maintain and even build a little bit on your physical properties while you're in season. Not at the rate that you'll build on them in your off season, but in season you should still be seeing some pretty solid climb. If you're 15 years old, especially if that training age is really low and you're in your first 1, 2, or 3 years of really lifting weights, you're going to see some pretty good gains at that time. That's going to be huge, because even if they're really small, really incremental, the fact that you're improving, you can think of it as like momentum, carrying that into your off season versus having to cover the ground that you've lost by wasting that time in season.
I mean, I think the other question that I would have is like, how do you pull that off while you're also navigating multiple sports? Because so far we've talked about like, hey, I'm 15, I'm committed to playing baseball, whatever. But a lot of these folks are, the kids that we train are like, yeah, I'm 15, I want to play baseball in college, or I want to play a sport in college, but I play football in the fall, I play baseball in the spring. Like, so this time that you've got to like, do some of this off-season training and whatever is being taken up by the fact that you're like, left guard or whatever.
I think on the recovery side, if you're 15 or it's like, oh, if I lift today, tomorrow my output will be lower in football. It's like, probably not if you squat 140 pounds. It's like, if you squat, like as soon as you start to fail those lifts and you're pushing 300, 400 pounds, then your recovery will be impacted. But there is no muscle, there is going to be no delayed onset muscle soreness, for the first several months of training, probably. There's not going to be an impact to your recovery at a young age. In addition, when you push no weight, now it may feel heavy to you when you're doing it, and that's good. But the recovery, your body will not be taxed by that. So you can still do that playing basketball and all those other things.
Yeah,
and you can pick selections of exercises to be a little smarter about it too.
You're not driving significant neural fatigue at 15 years old because you don't have any the skill in the weight room, like Kyle's saying, to do so. And
that's
with that,
it's not just it's your neural coordination and all that, like balance and back squatting 400. I didn't realize how how much coordination is required in the bench press until it's started being difficult.
Yeah.
I'm like, you just lay it down and you push away. How hard is this? And it's like, oh my God, there's so much technique. And it's like, I can't believe how like much recovery this is on what a ridiculous lift this is. But like you learn pretty quick. It's, well, not quick. You learn at like 6 months in.
Yeah.
Then it's like the recovery is not purely muscular. It's the neural coordination to balance, to squat, and to bench, anything that has a strong eccentric component,
Right. And that's going to be a lot of the fatigue that actually like shows up the
Right.
most in your performance on the field. And when we're thinking about like programming around other sports, like that's just a different part of your training economy that's now being accounted for. Like if an athlete plays basketball, their program should have reduced aerobic work and reduced plyometric work because they're doing a lot of reactive work and they're getting their cardio systems pushed pretty hard in that sport. So their weight room should focus on what they're not getting there. So still a time that they can be working on strength, movement patterns in the weight room, and building the anaerobic capacity. Now, if it's a football player, that's going to be a little bit different. Those systems are going to be a little bit different than what you're going to use on a basketball court. And same thing for soccer. Like each sport is going to have its own which categories to different scales of the general physical properties. So if an athlete is in another sport, we're going to train less of those properties that are being taxed in sport, the same way that we do with our baseball guys in season, and allocate more effort and more of that training economy to those areas that are not getting trained. That way, it might not be like what's optimal for their physical development, but it's going to be optimal under the condition that they're going to play that other sport.